We've gathered a panel to provide an overview of Shari'ah-Compliant Investment. Our panel today includes Kris Ferranti, Jonathan Y. Newman, and John L. Opar, attorneys at Sherman & Sterling.
Islamic finance is a term often used to describe Shari'ah-compliant investment and may in fact be the most frequently used descriptor. However, I believe that the term Islamic finance is a misnomer in that it implies a method of financing only. And this fails to capture the breadth of compliant investment, which encompasses all commercial interactions of the followers of the religion of Islam. Sharia translates loosely as the guide or the path to water. Based on the principles set out in the Quran and the sayings and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, Sharia is an equity or asset-based system of investment. Contrary to what's implied by the term Islamic finance, it is not debt-based. Indeed, one of the basic tenets of Sharia-compliant investment is the prohibition on any payment or receipt of interest, or riba. Compliant investment also requires some degree of risk sharing, and it also promotes ethical investment. A key aspect of Sharia-compliant investment is its diversity or its lack of uniformity. There are a number of separate schools of thought within Islam, and as with all religions, practices and opinions as to what is in fact compliant differ across geographies and schools of thought. Real estate has historically been a prime target for compliant investment. The ijara is the focus of Kris's discussion. The istisna is a contract for the manufacture and purchase of a specified item. As the ijara, it requires essentially that an asset be in operation or ready for operation. But one could use an istisna and an ijara in sequentially to essentially achieve the desired result. The mudaraba and the musharaka are both forms of partnership, with the latter in more frequent use, often in sukuk products. And again, Jonathan's discussion of murabaha contracts will show how that form of contract can be combined with a wakala or a musawama to facilitate an investment in an investment or a real estate fund.
Interest-based financing systems are pervasive in the world economy. We all recognize that. Financial instruments and transactions are overwhelmingly interest-based. Leveraging investments in real estate, equipment, and other investments are predominantly accomplished through interest-based loans. But as covered earlier, interest or riba is prohibited by Sharia. This historically put Sharia-compliant investors at a major disadvantage in the world of finance and investment. So in the mid to late 90s, a group of Sharia-compliant investors and their lawyers developed a contractual structure that would look and feel familiar to both the banks and their lawyers and the Sharia-compliant investors and Sharia scholars. Lease financing would be the model, and that is what the ijara structure essentially is. The ijara is a form of lease, usually with an option to acquire. And there's good reason for widespread acceptance. With this structure, the lender makes a conventional loan, as it typically would in any similar financing. The relevant credit, underwriting, risk criteria are essentially the same as in any comparable conventional financing. No changes are needed to the lender's back office operations or reporting requirements or security collateral structure. With the ijara, both the Sharia-compliant investor and the lender are able to structure their investment for the most part the way they want. And the ijara structure has been used for many types of investments, not only real estate, but also equipment leases and infrastructure as just examples. The reason the ijara structure works is that it isolates the Sharia-compliant investors from any obligations under the conventional interest-based loan in the overall structure. The structure has also been referred to as a bifurcated structure, in that the ijara structure splits the overall structure in two, with a special purpose entity that will serve as the fee owner and borrower and conventional loan on one side, and the compliant investors and the other deal participants on the other, and only the Ijara lease documents connecting the two sides.
The classic or traditional form of murabaha contract has been around for centuries. Its original intended use was for trade finance. But the original purpose of such murabahas was to provide an asset to a willing buyer that doesn't have the funds to pay for the whole thing up front. The classic murabaha financing would be one in which a financier sells an asset it already owns or acquires to a buyer who agrees to pay the financier back for such item in deferred payment installments. Such deferred payments are split into a cost basis, representing the principal cost of the item, and a profit basis, some rate of return above the principal. The deferred payments are made over a period of time as negotiated in the murabaha agreement. An analogy to today's world would be the typical financing people take out on a car or an expensive piece of equipment, where the buyer obtains the asset now and then pays back the financier back over time in deferred payment installments of principal and also some rate of return above that. In recent decades, murabahas have been expanded beyond the trade finance context and are now used as a traditional financing and banking or fund investment tool. The financing and investment contexts in which they're used are quite versatile, and they include short and long-term financing. They can include investments into certain non-Sharia compliant real estate funds. If the murabaha transaction is a term loan or a one-time deposit, the parties would only need to enter into one murabaha agreement. If, however, the parties would like to structure the murabaha as more akin to a revolving credit facility, or in a scenario contemplating multiple deposits, the parties would typically enter into a master murabaha agreement, which contemplates a series of trades being performed as needed. Murabahas can also be used for fund investment structures.
Sherman is a full-service global law firm. Our practice focuses on commercial real estate transactions, including extensive experience advising with respect to foreign investment in U.S. real estate, and we have worked frequently on Shari'ah-compliant investments.